Once upon a time, in a realm where the skies shimmered with hues of lilac and gold, there lived a fairy named Selene. She was a tiny wisp of a creature, no taller than a daisy, with wings that glowed like the softest moonlight and hair that flowed like strands of spun silver. Selene dwelled in the Twilight Hollow, a hidden nook within the vast kingdom of Vaeloria, where the grass sparkled with dew that never faded, and flowers hummed lullabies to the breeze. Her home was a cozy hollow in the roots of an ancient willow, its branches draped low like a curtain, sheltering her bed of moss and petals. Selene was a keeper of small wonders, tending to the hollow's magic with a gentle touch, mending broken butterfly wings, coaxing shy blossoms to bloom, and whispering dreams into the night air. Yet beneath her delicate glow lay a restless spark, a longing for something beyond the hollow she could not yet name. The kingdom of Vaeloria stretched far beyond the hollow, its hills dotted with villages and its rivers winding through forests of emerald and amber. At its heart stood a castle of pale stone, warmed by ivy and crowned with towers that caught the sun's first light. Here lived Prince Tobin, a young man with eyes like the twilight sky and a smile that carried the warmth of a hearth fire. He was not a prince of grand quests or loud triumphs, but one who loved the quiet beauty of his land, riding through meadows to listen to the wind, sketching the shapes of clouds, and tending a garden of herbs behind the castle walls. Yet Tobin bore a secret burden, a curse laid upon him at birth by a forgotten enchantress, one that dimmed his spirit with an unshakable weariness, as if a shadow clung to his soul. The curse was subtle, unnoticed by most, but it grew heavier with each passing year, stealing the joy from his days. One twilight, as the sky softened into shades of rose and violet, Selene fluttered above the hollow, her wings casting a faint shimmer over the flowers below. She was gathering stardust from the evening air, a task she loved, for it lit the hollow with a gentle gleam, when a strange wind rustled through the willow's branches, carrying a sound she had never heard before. It was a sigh, soft and sorrowful, drifting from beyond the hollow's borders. Curious, Selene followed it, her wings humming as she darted through the trees, past the edges of her familiar world, and into the open meadows of Vaeloria. The sound grew clearer, a melody of longing woven with exhaustion, and she found its source by a stream, a young man in a cloak of deep blue, resting against a stone, his head bowed as if the weight of the world pressed upon him. It was Tobin, though she did not know his name, his twilight eyes half closed, his breath slow and heavy. Selene hovered in the shadows of a nearby willow, her glow dimmed so as not to startle him, and watched as he traced a finger through the water, the ripples catching the last light of day. She felt a tug at her heart, a warmth she could not explain, for though he was weary, there was a kindness in his stillness that echoed her own. The wind whispered again, and Tobin lifted his head, his gaze brushing the air where she hid, though he did not see her. In that moment, Selene's spark flared brighter. She sensed the shadow that clung to him, a thread of old magic she could almost touch, and knew her longing had found its purpose. She fluttered back to the hollow, her mind alight with wonder, determined to return to him, to unravel the mystery of his sorrow. And so, as the stars bloomed above Vaeloria, a tale began to weave itself, a gentle dance of fairy and prince, bound by a curse and a hope yet to be discovered, unfolding in a world of quiet magic and tender dreams. The stars twinkled softly over the kingdom of Vaeloria as Selene returned to the Twilight Hollow, her wings humming with the quiet thrill of her discovery. The night had deepened, wrapping the hollow in a velvet hush, and the flowers glowed faintly, their petals curling inward as if to dream. She settled into her mossy bed beneath the willow, the pendant of moonlight that was her home casting a gentle sheen across the roots, and let her thoughts drift to the prince by the stream. His weary sigh lingered in her mind, a melody she could not shake, and the shadow she had glimpsed around him felt like a riddle woven from the oldest magic. Selene was no stranger to the small enchantments of her hollow, mending wings, coaxing light from dew, but this was deeper, heavier, a thread that tugged at her restless spark. As the willow's branches swayed above her, she decided she would seek him again, not just out of curiosity, but with a tender hope to ease the burden he carried. The next evening, as the sky blushed with the last hues of sunset, Selene fluttered from the hollow once more, her wings shimmering in the fading light. She carried a tiny pouch woven from spider silk, filled with stardust she had gathered the night before, its glow warm against her side. The meadows of Vaeloria stretched wide and welcoming, their grasses swaying in a breeze that smelled of clover and distant rain, and she followed the stream's winding path, her heart guiding her back to where she had seen him. The stone by the water was empty now, the prince gone, but the air held a trace of his presence, a faint echo of that sorrowful sigh. Selene hovered low, her wings brushing the stream's surface, and noticed a trail of faint footprints pressed into the damp earth, leading toward a grove of silver birch trees that stood like sentinels at the meadow's edge. With a flutter of determination she followed, the stardust pouch swaying gently as she went. The birch grove was a quiet place, its slender trunks glowing faintly in the twilight, their leaves rustling with a sound like whispered secrets. Selene darted between them, her glow blending with the silver light, until she heard the soft crunch of footsteps ahead. There, beneath an arch of interwoven branches, stood Prince Tobin, his deep blue cloak catching the breeze as he knelt to tend a small patch of wilted herbs. His hands moved with care, though his shoulders slumped, and the shadow Selene had sensed clung closer now, a haze of gray that dimmed the twilight in his eyes. She perched on a low branch, her wings still, and watched as he pressed a finger to the soil, his brow furrowing as the herbs refused to brighten. The weariness in his movements tugged at her heart, and she felt the stardust pouch pulse faintly, as if it too longed to help him. Selene waited until the grove grew still, the prince resting back against a tree with a sigh that stirred the leaves. Then, with a gentle flap of her wings, she drifted closer, hovering just above the herbs. She opened the pouch and sprinkled a pinch of stardust over the patch, its light scattering like tiny stars across the soil. The herbs shivered, their leaves unfurling with a soft green glow, and a faint smile touched Tobin's lips, though he did not see her. Selene's glow brightened with joy, but she stayed hidden, her small form tucked behind a leaf, for she sensed the shadow shift, as if wary of her magic. The prince rose, his twilight eyes lingering on the revived herbs, and murmured a quiet thanks to the air, unaware of the fairy who watched him. Selene fluttered back to the shadows, her mind alight with questions. Why did the shadow cling to him, and how could her small magic lift it? As Tobin walked away, his footsteps fading into the night, she knew their paths would cross again, a gentle bond forming in the quiet of Vaeloria's twilight, pulling her deeper into a tale of enchantment and care. The night folded gently around the Twilight Hollow as Selene returned, her wings brushing the air with a soft shimmer that left trails of light in her wake. The willow's branches swayed in a welcoming rustle, and the flowers of the hollow glowed a little brighter, as if sensing the fairy's quiet excitement. She settled onto a petal, the stardust pouch still warm at her side, and let the memory of the prince's faint smile warm her too. The herbs had bloomed under her touch, a small victory against the shadow that weighed on him, and though it was a fleeting moment, it felt like the beginning of something larger, a thread of hope woven into the fabric of her restless spark. The hollow hummed around her, the the crickets chirping a lullaby, and Selene nestled into her mossy bed, her mind drifting between the prince's twilight eyes and the mystery of the curse she had glimpsed. Sleep came softly, wrapping her in dreams of silver groves and a light she could not yet see. When dawn painted the sky with strokes of peach and gold, Selene woke with a gentle resolve. The shadow on the prince was no small thing. It was old magic, deep and tangled, and her stardust alone would not unravel it. She needed to know more, to find the root of its power, and the hollow held keepers of such secrets. She fluttered to the heart of the Twilight Hollow, where the oldest tree stood, a gnarled oak with bark like woven stories, its roots cradling a pool of water so clear it mirrored the sky. Beside the pool sat a tortoise, her shell etched with patterns of stars, her eyes wise and slow. Her name was Mira, a guardian of the Hollow's lore, and Selene approached her with a dip of her wings, her glow soft and respectful. Mira turned her head, her gaze steady, and though she did not speak, the air between them carried a question Selene answered with a flutter of her tiny hands, telling of the prince and the shadow she had seen. The tortoise listened, her shell glinting as the sun climbed higher, and then she dipped her head to the pool. The water rippled, its surface shifting to reveal images, a babe in a cradle, a cloaked figure whispering over him, and a thread of gray magic winding tight around his heart. Selene's wings stilled as she watched, the scene fading to show Prince Tobin as he was now, the shadow growing heavier with each year. Mira lifted her eyes, and Selene understood. The curse had been cast at his birth, a spell of weariness meant to dim his light forever, though why, the pool did not say. The tortoise nudged a pebble toward her, smooth and silver, and as Selene touched it, it pulsed with a faint warmth, a gift of clarity, Mira's way of guiding her forward. Selene tucked it into her pouch beside the stardust, her heart steady with purpose, knowing she must find the source of the curse to lift it. That evening, as the sky softened into shades of lavender, Selene flew back to the birch grove, the pebble and stardust glowing faintly against her side. The prince was there again, sitting by the stream this time, his cloak spread across the grass like a patch of night. He held a small sketchbook, his fingers tracing lines of a flower that mirrored the one she had revived, and Selene felt a warmth bloom in her chest. She hovered near, hidden in the reeds, and sprinkled another pinch of stardust over the water, its light dancing across the surface in tiny ripples. Tobin looked up, his twilight eyes catching the glow, and for a moment, the shadow seemed to thin, his weariness easing as he watched the water shimmer. Selene's wings fluttered with quiet joy, but she knew this was only a fleeting relief. The pebble hummed against her, urging her toward the curse's origin. As Tobin rose and walked toward the castle, she followed at a distance, her glow dimmed, drawn by a thread of magic that whispered of secrets hidden in Vaeloria's heart, pulling her deeper into the gentle tale unfolding beneath the stars. The twilight deepened over Vaeloria as Selene trailed Prince Tobin, her wings a faint shimmer against the gathering dusk. The castle loomed ahead, its pale stones catching the last light of day, and the meadows gave way to gardens where roses nodded sleepily and lanterns flickered like captured stars. Tobin's steps were slow, his cloak brushing the gravel paths, and Selene hovered just out of sight, her glow tucked behind leaves and shadows. The pebble in her pouch pulsed softly, a steady rhythm that matched the hum of the stardust, and she felt its pull guiding her, not just to the prince, but to something older, something woven into the castle's very roots. The air carried the scent of lavender and warm earth, and the night settled gently around them, the cricket's song weaving a blanket of sound that softened the edges of the world. Selene's spark flared brighter. She was close to the curse's heart, she knew it, and her small magic tingled with the promise of discovery. Tobin paused at a low wall overgrown with ivy, his hand resting on the stone as he gazed out over the valley, the weariness in his posture tugging at Selene's heart. She fluttered closer, perching on a branch above him, and watched as he sighed, the sound carrying that same sorrow she had first heard by the stream. The pebble glowed warmer now, and she slipped it from her pouch, holding it between her tiny hands. Its silver surface shimmered, and a faint image flickered within, a tower at the castle's edge, its windows dark, its stones etched with runes long faded. Selene's wings stilled as she recognized it, a spire she had glimpsed from the hollow's borders, always shadowed, always silent. The pebble's light pulsed once more, then dimmed, and she knew the curse's source lay there, hidden in the tower's depths. Tobin turned back toward the castle, his twilight eyes lingering on the night, and Selene followed, her resolve as soft and steady as the breeze. The tower stood apart from the castle's warm glow, its stones cold and gray, its door sealed with vines that seemed to cling too tightly. Selene darted ahead of Tobin, slipping through a crack in the wall where the ivy parted, and entered a dim chamber draped in dust and quiet. The air was still, heavy with the scent of forgotten things, old parchment, dried herbs, and a faint tang of magic that prickled her wings. A spiral stair wound upward, its steps worn smooth, and Selene flew toward it, the pebble and stardust glowing faintly in her pouch. At the top, she found a room bathed in shadow, its walls lined with shelves of crumbling books and jars of faded leaves. In the center stood a cradle, small and simple, its wood darkened by time, and above it hung a tapestry, its threads woven with a figure in a hooded cloak, hands outstretched over the crib. Selene's heart quickened. This was where the curse had begun, the moment the pebble had shown her. She fluttered to the cradle, her glow casting a soft light across its surface, and noticed a faint shimmer beneath its blanket, a thread of gray magic, thin as a whisper, pulsing with a life of its own. The pebble hummed louder now, and Selene sprinkled a pinch of stardust over the thread, watching as it flinched, then steadied, its gray deepening. Her magic could touch it, but not break it, not yet. The tapestry rustled, and she turned to see the figure's woven eyes glint, as if alive, and a chill brushed her wings. This was the enchantress's work, a spell tied to the cradle and the prince, and Selene knew she needed more than stardust to undo it. She tucked the pebble back into her pouch, her mind alight with the tower's secrets, and slipped out as quietly as she had come, the night wrapping her in its gentle hush. Tobin was near the castle doors now, his silhouette fading into the warm light within, and Selene lingered, her glow dimmed, feeling the weight of the curse and the hope of lifting it settle together in her heart, a tender promise guiding her forward. The stars hung low over Vaeloria as Selene fluttered back to the Twilight Hollow, her wings brushing the night with a faint silver glow. The castle's silhouette faded behind her, its warm light swallowed by the dark, and the meadows whispered their lullabies as she passed, the grass bending gently in her wake. The tower's secrets weighed on her mind, the cradle, the gray thread of magic, the tapestry's glinting eyes, and though her stardust had stirred the curse, it had not broken it. The pebble in her pouch pulsed softly, a steady warmth against her side, and the hollow welcomed her with its familiar hum, the willow's branches swaying as if to cradle her return. She settled onto a leaf by the oak, the tortoise Mira still resting beside the pool, her starry shell catching the moonlight. Selene's glow dimmed as she curled up, her thoughts drifting to Prince Tobin's weary smile, and she knew she needed more than her small magic to free him, a deeper power, one the hollow might hold. Morning arrived with a gentle mist, the sky a soft wash of gray and gold, and Selene rose with the dawn, her wings shimmering with dew. She fluttered to Mira, the pebble in her hands, and let its light spill across the tortoise's shell, a silent plea for guidance. Mira's eyes opened slowly, wise and calm, and she dipped her head to the pool once more. The water rippled, revealing the tower again, the cradle bathed in shadows, and then a new image, a glade beyond the hollow, its trees woven with light, its air thick with the scent of ancient blooms. In its center glowed a flower, its petals silver and gold, radiant with a magic that pulsed like a heartbeat. Mira nudged another pebble toward her, this one etched with a tiny leaf, and Selene felt its meaning settle in her chest. The flower held the power to break the curse, a bloom of old enchantment hidden in the glade of echoes. She tucked the new pebble beside the first, her spark flaring with quiet hope, and thanked Mira with a dip of her wings. With the sun climbing higher, Selene set out, her pouch glowing with stardust and pebbles, her heart steady as she flew beyond the Twilight Hollow's borders. The glade of echoes lay deep in Vaeloria's wilds, past streams that glittered like glass and hills that rolled like sleeping giants. The journey was long, the air growing cooler as she went, but the hollow's magic clung to her, keeping her wings light. At last she reached the glade, its trees arching high and golden, their leaves shimmering with a light that danced like fireflies. The ground was soft with moss, and flowers bloomed in every hue, their petals humming softly. In the center stood the flower Mira had shown her, a radiant bloom, its silver petals tipped with gold, its glow warm and alive. Selene fluttered closer, her breath catching at its beauty, and felt the pebbles pulse in unison, as if they recognized its power. She reached out, her tiny hands brushing its stem, and the flower shivered, its light flaring briefly before settling into a steady shine. Selene knew this was no ordinary bloom. It was a piece of Vaeloria's oldest magic, a gift from the land itself, strong enough to unravel the curse's thread. She carefully plucked it, its roots curling gently into her pouch, and the glade sighed, its trees bending as if in blessing. The journey back would wait, for night was falling, and the glade offered its shelter, a hollow in a golden tree, its walls soft with lichen, where Selene nestled with the flower close. The air hummed with the flower's glow, and she felt Tobin's shadow in her thoughts, a quiet promise that she could lift it now, with this bloom in her hands. The stars peeked through the glade's canopy, their light mingling with the flowers, and Selene rested, her wings folded, her heart alight with the gentle courage of the path ahead, a fairy's magic poised to weave a prince's freedom in the tender night. The glade of echoes cradled Selene through the night, its golden trees whispering a soft lullaby as the flowers' glow bathed her in warmth. The mossy hollow where she rested felt like a nest woven just for her, and the pebbles in her pouch pulsed gently, their rhythm a quiet comfort against the flower's radiant shine. Dawn slipped through the canopy in threads of amber and rose, waking the glade with a shimmer that danced across its blooms, and Selene stirred, her wings fluttering as she cradled the silver and gold flower. Its power hummed beneath her touch, a magic older than the Twilight Hollow, and she knew it was time to return to Vaeloria's heart, to Prince Tobin, to the tower, to the curse that awaited her gentle undoing. She tucked the flower into her pouch, its glow softening as it nestled beside the stardust and pebbles, and with a final glance at the glade's beauty, she took flight, her wings catching the morning light as she soared back toward the castle. The journey home was swift, the wind carrying her over hills and streams, the land of Vaeloria waking beneath her in a chorus of birdsong and rustling leaves. The castle came into view as the sun climbed higher, its pale stones glowing with the day's warmth, and Selene's heart lifted at the sight. She darted through the gardens, past Tobin's herbs now thriving with her stardust's touch, and slipped once more through the crack in the tower's wall. The chamber was as she had left it, dusty and still, the spiral stair winding upward like a promise, and she flew to the top, the flower's glow spilling from her pouch as she entered the room of the cradle and tapestry. The gray thread of magic pulsed faintly above the crib, its presence heavier now, as if sensing her return, and the tapestry's woven eyes glinted with a wary light. Selene hovered before it, her wings steady, and felt the flower's power flare, a quiet strength ready to meet the curse. She drew the flower from her pouch, its silver petals catching the dim light, and held it toward the gray thread. The room trembled softly, the air thickening with the scent of ancient blooms, and the thread writhed, shrinking back as the flower's glow touched it. Selene sprinkled a pinch of stardust over the cradle, its shimmer mingling with the flower's radiance, and the thread hissed faintly, its gray fading to a softer hue. She pressed the flower closer, its golden tips brushing the magic, and the thread began to unravel, its edges fraying like old cloth beneath her touch. The tapestry rustled, the enchantress's woven form flickering, and a whisper filled the room, a voice long silent, sharp with fading power, urging the curse to hold. But Selene's magic was gentle and sure, the flower's light weaving through the thread until it snapped, dissolving into motes of dust that drifted harmlessly to the floor. The tapestry dimmed, its eyes closing, and the room sighed, the weight of old magic lifting like mist burned away by dawn. Selene fluttered back, her wings trembling with quiet joy, and tucked the flower into her pouch, its glow now a steady warmth. The cradle stood empty, the curse undone, and she felt a lightness in the air that reached beyond the tower, a thread of hope stretching toward Tobin. She slipped out, the evening sky purpling above the castle, and followed the gardens to where the prince sat, his cloak spread across a bench, his twilight eyes tracing the stars. The shadow was gone, his weariness softened to a calm she hadn't seen before, and Selene's heart swelled as she hovered near, hidden in the roses. He breathed deeply, a smile touching his lips, and she knew the curse's end had reached him, though he did not yet know her part. The night wrapped them in its gentle embrace, the flower's magic humming softly in her pouch, and Selene lingered, her glow dimmed, feeling the bond between them grow, a fairy's gift, a prince's peace, woven together in the quiet dusk of Vaeloria. The evening settled over Vaeloria like a soft shawl, the sky deepening to a velvet blue as stars blinked awake above the castle gardens. Selene hovered among the roses, her wings a faint shimmer in the twilight, the flower's gentle glow pulsing in her pouch beside the stardust and pebbles. Prince Tobin sat on the bench below, his deep blue cloak pooling around him, his twilight eyes brighter now, free of the shadow that had dimmed them for so long. The air carried the scent of blooming herbs and the distant murmur of the stream, and a quiet joy warmed Selene's heart as she watched him. The curse was gone, its gray thread unraveled in the tower, and though Tobin did not know her name or her tiny form, she felt the change in him, a lightness in his breath, a softness in his smile, that mirrored the peace she had longed to give. The roses swayed gently around her, their petals brushing her wings, and she knew her journey was nearing its end, though one thread remained to tie their tale together. Tobin rose from the bench, his movements steady and unburdened, and wandered toward the garden's edge, where a patch of wildflowers bloomed under her stardust's care. He knelt beside them, his fingers tracing their petals, and Selene fluttered closer, her glow tucked behind a leaf. The flower in her pouch hummed, its silver and gold light a quiet song, and she felt its magic stir, a final gift, not for the curse, but for the prince himself. She slipped the flower from her pouch, its radiance spilling across her hands, and darted to the wildflowers, nestling it among them. The bloom took root instantly, its glow spreading through the patch, turning the flowers into a carpet of silver and gold that shimmered like a piece of the glade of echoes brought to Vaeloria. Tobin's eyes widened, a soft laugh escaping him, and Selene's wings fluttered with delight, her spark dancing at the sound. The night grew still, the castle lanterns casting a warm glow across the gardens, and Selene knew it was time to show herself, not as a secret helper, but as the fairy who had walked this path with him. She fluttered from the leaf, her glow brightening to a gentle moonlight, and hovered before Tobin, her tiny form framed by the flower's radiance. He looked up, his twilight eyes meeting hers, and a wonder softened his features, his weariness replaced by a quiet awe. Selene dipped her wings in a shy greeting, the stardust pouch swaying at her side, and though she did not speak, the air carried her story, the hollow, the tower, the flower, the curse undone. Tobin's smile grew, warm and kind, and he extended a hand, palm up, as if inviting her to land. She settled there, her wings folding, and felt the warmth of his touch, a bond forged not in words, but in the gentle magic they had shared. They stayed like that as the stars climbed higher, the garden humming with the flowers' light, and Selene felt her restless spark settle into a tender peace. Tobin's voice broke the silence at last, a murmur of thanks to the fairy who had lifted his burden, and she glowed brighter, her heart full. The night wrapped them in its cozy embrace, the wildflowers shimmering around them, and Selene knew she had found her purpose, not just in the hollow, but in the quiet joy of this moment. The castle stood watch, its stones aglow with lantern light, and Vaeloria slept under a sky that twinkled with a promise kept, a fairy and a prince bound by a tale of kindness and wonder, their hearts alight in the gentle dusk. The garden of Vaeloria glowed softly under the starlight, the silver and gold wildflowers casting a gentle shimmer around Selene and Prince Tobin as they lingered in the night's embrace. She rested on his palm, her wings folded neatly, her glow a warm moonlight that danced in his twilight eyes. The air was sweet with the scent of herbs and blooming roses, and the distant stream sang a lullaby that wove through the stillness, wrapping them in a cocoon of peace. Tobin's smile held a quiet wonder, his weariness gone, replaced by a lightness that mirrored the flower's radiance, and Selene felt a tender warmth bloom within her, a connection forged through her small magic and his steady kindness. The castle loomed behind them, its lanterns flickering like stars brought to earth, and the kingdom slept, unaware of the fairy and prince who had mended its hidden wound, their tale drawing to a cozy close beneath the vast, twinkling sky. Tobin lowered his hand gently, letting Selene flutter back to the wildflowers, and he sat beside them, his cloak spread across the grass like a patch of midnight. She hovered near, her pouch still glowing with stardust and pebbles, and sprinkled a final pinch over the blooms, their light flaring briefly before settling into a steady shine. The prince watched, his twilight eyes soft with gratitude, and murmured a promise, to tend this garden, to keep its magic alive, a tribute to the fairy who had brought him peace. Selene's wings hummed with quiet joy, and she darted upward, circling him once before landing on a petal, her glow blending with the flower's radiance. The night seemed to sigh, the breeze brushing the leaves in a gentle farewell, and she knew her time in the castle was ending, though their bond would linger like a star in her heart. As the moon climbed higher, bathing Vaeloria in silver, Selene felt the pull of the Twilight Hollow calling her home. She fluttered to Tobin's shoulder one last time, her tiny hand brushing his cloak, and he smiled, a warmth in his gaze that needed no words. With a dip of her wings, she took flight, the flower's light glowing faintly in the garden below as she soared over the meadows, the hills, and the streams that sparkled like glass. The hollow welcomed her with its familiar hush, the willow's branches parting to cradle her return, and she settled into her mossy bed, the pebbles and empty stardust pouch tucked beside her. The flowers of the hollow glowed brighter, as if sharing her joy, and Mira the tortoise lifted her starry shell in a slow nod, her wise eyes glinting with pride. Selene's glow softened, her spark now a steady flame, and she drifted into sleep, dreaming of twilight eyes and a garden aglow. Morning broke over Vaeloria with a golden calm, the castle waking to a prince renewed, his steps light as he tended the wildflowers, their silver and gold petals a secret treasure in the garden's heart. The kingdom flourished under his care, the meadows blooming vivid and the rivers singing strong, a quiet magic threading through the land once more. Selene stayed in the hollow, her days filled with mending wings and coaxing blooms, but her nights often drew her to the hollow's edge, where she gazed toward the castle, her glow a beacon of the bond she had woven. Tobin never forgot the fairy who had freed him, and the garden became a place of peace, a sanctuary where children played and stories of a tiny light were whispered. The stars above twinkled with a gentle promise, the hollow and the castle linked by a tale of kindness and wonder, and Selene rested in its glow, her heart full, knowing she had found her place in Vaeloria's tender, happy ending.